Cuba sits across the Caribbean like a slender streak of land, almost within reach of the mainland. Yet it feels separated by more than distance. This is not the kind of island you only visit. It's a living set for history, where sea air, street music, and the memory of gunfire have shared the same stage for generations. In Havana, time doesn't exactly stop, it lingers. Old streets hold the heat of the day, and pastel cars glide past as if they never got the message that decades have changed. From a worn balcony above the street, a woman lets her eyes drift shut while a Son Cubano tune buzzes softly from an aging speaker. Below her, children feed pigeons with the careless ease of people too young to carry the weight of what had happened here. Yet, Havana can never be separated from revolution. Fidel Castro and Che Guevara live far beyond museums and textbooks. Their presence spills into daily life through posters, shirts, painted walls, and conversations that never fully fade. Che's face appears again and again beside a phrase that has become part warning, part promise, hasta la victoria siempre, until victory, always. People still tell stories about those early days, when the streets were tense, the nights were darker, and even then the tres guitar could be heard threading through the alleys of the poorest neighborhoods. In Cuba, music was never decoration, it was survival. A way for the spirit to push back when history pressed too hard. Long before the revolution, Cuba was one of Spain's most valuable colonial prizes, fueled by sugar and tobacco that fed empires across the Atlantic. But the island was also a meeting point. African captives, European traders, and Chinese migrants folding into one another over time, creating a cultural blend that can be heard as much as it can be seen. Havana holds its legends as naturally as it holds its music. One of the best known is La Milagrosa, a woman said to grant miracles from her grave in Colon Cemetery. Visitors knock 3 times on her tomb and whisper what they want most. Convinced, she listens from the other side. In a place where faith and reality walk shoulder to shoulder, stories like that don't feel strange, or they feel normal. Step into Habana Vieja, and the city starts speaking through details. Of a husband lost at sea, of a child dreaming of becoming a musician, or an aging dancer longing for the stage. Even the stones underfoot feel loaded with human effort, with hope and regret pressed into them over centuries. Floridita, Hemingway still hovers in the air like a local saint. People point to the stool he used, the drink he favored, how the way he watched the room, then wrote Cuba into the world. And when night falls along the Malecon, that long seawall unfurling beside the waves, the city gathers there to talk, sing, flirt, breathe, and briefly forget the shortages. Cuba doesn't separate life from music. They're the same thing. Wealth has never been the island's headline, but neither has resignation. Cubans have a talent for making the moment feel complete, even when resources are thin. In many homes, a pot of rice is still the anchor of the kitchen. Simple, hot, reliable, even when the rest of the meal has to be improvised. In the faces of older people, you can read something steadier than nostalgia, pride. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that comes from enduring every turn of history and still standing. One old man put it plainly, "We don't need to win, we just need to hear our drums." Visitors come to Cuba to slow their pace. Cubans have lived in a place that once burned with intensity, where private sacrifices rarely show up on any itinerary. No tour guide can lead you into the memory of a wife sending her husband to war, or the letters that were written and never mailed. But those memories never disappeared. They stayed inside voices, inside eyes, inside songs that keep returning. That's why people don't leave Cuba with only photos. Maybe it's because the island never fully stepped into the modern world and never fully stepped out of history. Peeling walls and old radios don't just show age, they carry a whisper. And within that presence are the most unexpected smiles, belonging to people who have known hunger, loss, and struggle, yet still hold on to tomorrow. Jamaica barely needs an introduction. One reggae rhythm drops, and the world recognizes her instantly. From the dense streets of Kingston to the sun-washed calm of Negro, music moves through the island like blood through a body. But beneath the easy bass lines and the dancing silhouettes is a heavier truth. A story of identity, endurance, and freedom spoken out loud. Jamaica was once a British colony, pulled into the machinery of the transatlantic slave trade. And from that rupture, Jamaicans built a culture that could not be copied, only respected. Reggae rose from the pressure like a testimony, part lullaby, part protest, a black poem carried on air. In that story, Bob Marley isn't treated as a celebrity so much as a messenger. He carried unity like a torch and turned spiritual liberation into something you could sing. Locals will tell you, with the calm certainty of belief, that he didn't die, he returned to the motherland. And in the Jamaican imagination, that motherland is Zion, a promised land beyond chains and separation, a place where dignity is not negotiated. That longing helped shape Rastafari, faith as resistance, spirituality as a way to stand upright in a world that tried to bend people into silence. Many Rastafarians hold to the vision of reunion with Africa, guided by their reverence for Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. Dreadlocks are worn not as fashion, but as symbol, tied to the Lion of Judah, a sign of strength and self-respect. Their Etau way of eating leans plant-based, avoiding processed chemicals, staying close to what feels natural and clean, as a quiet refusal of anything that dulls the human spirit. Here, music isn't treated as background noise. It's medicine. It's memory. It's community. A young artist once put it perfectly. Jamaicans may be poor, but they have rhythm, and nobody can tax a sound. People arrive for the scenery. Dunn's River Falls pouring into turquoise pools, Sunsets at Rick's Cafe that look like they were staged for a movie. Kids shape percussion with nothing but their mouths. Elders keep time on Nyabingi drums. Voices rise like a prayer without walls. No stage lights, no expensive gear, just heartbeat and conviction. Then there are the stories that live in the hills. A legend says that when ancestors were taken into slavery, they left their souls behind in the Blue Mountains. Walk deep into that forest at dawn, sit beneath an old palm, and you might hear something faint, less like wind, more like memory. Not wind, but memory. That is why many Rastafarians hold the Blue Mountains as sacred ground, the place where I and I, the self and the divine, become one. Even the sunsets carry weight here. Each evening, people turn toward the sea and sing old songs, farewells to ancestors, a gratitude for surviving another day. And Jamaica's food speaks with the same boldness. Jerk chicken hisses over coals, spicy and smoky, while golden patties flake apart in your hands. Each meal tastes like a story of a hardship that never surrendered its dignity. In the countryside, elders still warn about duppies, wandering spirits said to move through the night. If you hear footsteps behind you while walking alone, don't turn around, just keep moving. It's superstition, sure, but it's also a lesson. Fear doesn't get to steer your life. In the everyday language, every ya man, every respect, you feel the thread that ties people together. Human to human, human to nature, present to ancestor. Jamaica moves slowly, but her pulse is deep. Maybe it's the rare feeling of standing somewhere and realizing you are not being measured. Jamaica doesn't lecture you about who to become. She reminds you that you already are enough. And sometimes, under these bright, heat-soaked skies, you don't just discover a place, you rediscover yourself. That's why Jamaica is not only a destination, it's a state of mind. The Dominican Republic rests on the eastern side of Hispaniola, wrapped in a bright tropical facade, sunlit coastlines, wide ribbons of gold sand, and resorts polished to perfection. But that shine sits on top of a rougher story. The sea didn't always bring vacationers. Once, it carried soldiers, slave ships, and European diseases that rewrote the island's future. This is the land tied to the earliest chapter of Spanish colonization in the Americas, where Columbus arrived in 1492 and where centuries of Spanish rule took hold. In Santo Domingo, the capital, that history feels unusually close. It is often described as the oldest European-founded city in the New World, and the Zona Colonial still holds its cobblestone streets like an open archive. But among the ancient stones linger silent souls, the first Taino natives, the enslaved Africans sold into bondage, the dreams that never took form. Some locals swear that on nights with a bright moon, if you pass near the Ozama fortress alone, you might catch the sound of distant hoofbeats or prayers murmured in Old Spanish. No one can prove whether it's real or imagined, but that's the point. In this country, history doesn't sit quietly in museums. It hangs in the air. the Dominican Republic constantly shifts between light and shadow. In daylight, it's Caribbean color and movement, bachata and merengue spilling into streets, laughter rolling like surf. At night, it can feel like an old black and white film, beautiful and uneasy at the same time. Down in Bahia Hibi, the coastline still carries the rhythms of fishing villages. Some fishermen build small altars near the water, placing fruit and candles for Yamea, the Afro-Caribbean spirit of the sea. And along these shores, music wanders too. Men with nothing but a guitar and a heavy story who can quiet an entire bar with a single song. Step away from the resort strip and a different Dominican Republic appears, villages tucked deep in valleys, children playing ball with dried coconuts, elders trading stories under palms that sway like slow metronomes. People talk about a cave in the mountains where Taino once hid from Spanish soldiers. In that darkness, they carved symbols into stone, the last marks of a culture being erased. Back in Santo Domingo, Independence Square still draws crowds who honor the moment the country broke away from Haitian rule in 1844. Yet, few mention that the Haitians were also victims of colonialism. The border they share on one island has never felt like a clean line, not on the map and not in the heart. For many Dominicans, love for the homeland comes with pride and with doubts that don't fade easily. How do you celebrate when the wounds are still open? How do you hold joy and history in the same hands? There is a legend that returns each summer, every July, when the Caribbean Sea grows strangely quiet. The spirits of the Taino come back as shimmering fish, gliding through the bay as if searching for home. Elders say that if you ever see those glowing shapes, you should close your eyes and make a wish, because the ancestors are listening. It's stories like this that make the Dominican Republic feel both grounded and dreamlike. You can drink rum, lounge under a palm, and dance like any tourist. But if you pause, if you actually listen, you start to notice the layers. It is an island of music, but also of memory. An island of sunlit smiles and secrets hidden beneath each wave. As the sun sets and bachata drifts from an old speaker in a backyard, the dancing continues. Here, dancing is more than entertainment. It's survival. It's how people release what cannot be repaired. The Dominican Republic is not a perfect paradise, and that is exactly why it can reach so deep. When you leave, what stays with you won't only be the sunlight. It will be the feeling that you passed through a place that has been wounded many times, yet somehow refuses to break. A Caribbean story written in sand, rhythm, and resilience. Seen from far out at sea, St. Lucia can look like a still image, too perfect to be real. Then the outline sharpens, and the island reveals its signature. Two volcanic spires punching straight into the sky. Gros Piton and Petit Piton don't just stand there like scenery. They dominate the horizon like twin spears, and locals speak of them with the kind of respect reserved for living beings. Two souls, they say, waiting to be set free. This is one of the rare places where the planet changes costumes phase. You can coat your skin in warm volcanic mud, rinse it clean, and still have time to slip into clear water and drift above coral reefs in the same day. The island is barely about 50 kilometers long, yet it feels like a condensed world. Green hills fold into jungle, then open into cacao farms, waterfalls, and fishing villages painted in bright, handmade colors. Down in Soufrière, where the pitons throw long shadows across the sea. Hay travel by word of mouth, carried like family heirlooms. Villagers believe that on nights of a blood moon. Some elders claim that on nights when the moon turns blood red, a crimson mist rises between the pitons, a love curse that time cannot untie. The elders warn, never kiss anyone beneath the mountains on that night, unless you're ready to love forever, even in stone. But St. Lucia isn't only myth. It's also a place where people live as if myth and reality belong in the same room. During the La Rose and La Marguerite festivals, the island becomes a moving pageant, queens and kings, knights and singers, and old songs carried forward like living chapters. These festivals once marked rival cultural societies, but today they stand side by side, protecting a Creole identity shaped by African endurance and French influence, fused into something that feels unmistakably St. Lucian. You can taste that fusion in the food. St. Lucia's cuisine is a conversation. French garlic meeting, Caribbean heat, and older indigenous techniques. Out at Anse Chastenay, one of the island's best-known dive sites, the underwater world feels like another version of the same spell. The pitons aren't just on postcards, they're everywhere. Painted on fabric, brushed onto wooden doors, printed on cans, repeated like a greeting and a signature. They rise on the national flag too, like two sharp eyes pointed toward the future. Castries, the capital, is the island's loudest pulse. Fish markets, colonial churches, ferries circling the coast with the steady rhythm of daily life. Step just beyond the city, though, and the island softens into green. In places like Hotel Chocolat, visitors can harvest cacao pods, roast the beans, and craft a chocolate that seems to carry the island's volcanic character inside its flavor. One chocolatier once said every cacao bean holds a story, and the taste depends on where the tale was told. St. Lucia's history was never calm. The island was fought over by the French and British again and again. Locals joke it changed hands more often than the weather changes moods. But instead of erasing identity, that pressure sharpened it. At night, behind wooden homes, hand-carved drums come alive. No grand theaters, no spotlights, just rhythm, sea breeze, and faith in simple beauty. When people leave St. Lucia, what stays in their mind is almost always the same image: the Twin Peaks. There's pride in that gaze, the pride of a small island that never lowers its head. There's tenderness, too, like two eyes guarding an ancient promise. St. Lucia is the island people come to for the ocean, but carry home because of the mountains. And in the quietest moments, beneath a crimson sunset, you might swear you can hear the land's heartbeat, followed by a whisper that sounds almost like a request. Remember me. Curaçao doesn't introduce itself with a single story. It arrives like harmony, many voices layered into one place. Just off the coast of Venezuela, where Caribbean air collides with Atlantic pull, the island feels like a living soundtrack made of languages, color, and remembered history. From the sky, Curaçao looks like watercolor on salt, deep blue water, warm earth tones, and neighborhoods painted in soft pinks and yellows, as if the island decided brightness was a form of survival. Willemstad, the capital, is where that choice becomes visible. Dutch gabled buildings line the waterfront, but they're dressed in bold color, part celebration, part shield. Locals like to joke that gray walls lead to gray hearts, so the city refuses to fade. Yet beneath the postcard beauty sits a harder truth. Curaçao was once a major hub in the Dutch slave trade. Pain arrived by ship and was tied to wooden posts. And still, people found a way to keep their humanity intact, through music, through faith, through the quiet rebellion of culture that refused to disappear. The primary language is Papiamento, a beautiful Creole woven from Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, English, and Bantu tongues from Africa. In the hills near the village of Barber, stories still circulate about a mystic woman who could speak with whales. Legend says she lived in a small hut lined with dried coconut husks, and every morning she pressed her ear to the ground to hear news from the sea. Some children still believe that if you stand perfectly still in a divi forest under a crescent moon, you might hear her whispering in ancient Papiamento. No one can translate the words, but that almost makes it more powerful. People fall silent anyway. And then, only a few streets away, Curaçao shifts again. The island may not have towering mountains, but it holds places that feel like time capsules. The Hato Caves once sheltered Arawak people fleeing colonial forces. On the stone walls, red handprints remain, quiet messages that seem to say, "We were here." Some locals believe the spirits of ancestors arrive on the southwest winds. If the breeze presses against you on the way to the shore, they'll tell you it's not just weather. It's a reminder to remember where you came from. Every year, Willemstad turns into pure rhythm during the Tumba festival. Drums, horns, dancers, and streamers flood the streets like a musical storm. But beneath the joy is memory. Even the food tells the same story of layers. Queixiena, Edam cheese stuffed with spiced meat, olives, and raisins, tastes like Curaçao in one bite, Dutch on the outside, Caribbean at the core. Out at sea, the water is so clear it feels almost unreal, like the island has nothing to hide. Beneath the surface are coral reefs, sunken statues, and sometimes a sea turtle drifting past, slow and calm, as if guarding the island's memory. At night, seaside bars wake up in multiple languages at once, but every toast lands in the same laughter. People don't lead with, "Where are you from?" as much as, "What's your favorite dish?" or, "Can you sing?" On Curaçao, identity isn't a fixed label, it moves. Like waves, like rhythm, like wind. Every voice is welcomed, as long as it comes from the heart. Not everyone who visits Curaçao catches the entire story. But everyone carries something home, maybe a phrase in papiamento, maybe a color that refuses to fade from memory, maybe the feeling of being welcomed without having to explain yourself. And once you feel it, forgetting becomes almost impossible. Some islands are beautiful because of their landscapes. Others, like Curaçao, are beautiful because they've learned how to live with memory.